recording software does not really get along well with other software. But what the heck, we'll try again. M.C.Toon, the worst rapper on the internet. It's the guy on the left with the Rider of Dinosaurs t-shirt. Nice shout out. You can see in the background he has a whole lot of air nav maps stuck together with a line on them. Yeah, that's from an amusing previous thing where he actually mapped out a triangle with 3 90-degree angles on the Earth's surface. He has a recent video which I shall remember to link in the description if I manage to keep my brain functioning that well long enough, in which he exposed a serial liar, Daniel Seppings, no matter a whole lot of names, actually. He's used many. And he's also used many people, and many people's money. You can look him up if you want to. You know, he has an interesting history of stealing people's money and being accused of sexually abusing children and a few other things. He's got a piece of paper which he claims to be a certificate from the police in Honduras saying that he never did it, which would be an interesting piece of paper. Not that he held it up close enough to the camera for us to examine it. You know, he probably wrote it and printed it out himself. But it would be a fascinating piece of paper because it would indicate that Honduras is the only country in the world where people are actually found innocent rather than presumed innocent until proven guilty. Anyway, M.C.Toon invited him on pretext of talking about flat Earth, and then changed the title of the stream to be exposing a serial liar to his face, and exposed all kinds of stuff about his past. But the particular claim he started out with was a claim to have seen Melbourne, Australia, from Portsea Pier, which is this thing. This is the Google Maps view of it. You can get it in Bing as well. If you get it in Bing, then the coordinates will be at the bottom with a copy to clipboard you can click on. Here they're at the top. Clicking on them does copy them to clipboard. Do this yourself if you want to. You can also make a note of them from the screen here. Oh, sorry, hang on. Recording software does not get along well with other software, so let's just make sure this is on screen. And then say, there's Portsea Pier, south and slightly west of Melbourne. South coast of Australia, if you prefer. At the coordinates that are at the top of the menu, because this is Google. If it was Bing, they'd be at the bottom. Either way, clicking on them will copy them to clipboard. You can go and do this yourself if you want to. And having copied them to clipboard, you can paste them into the location thing on NS6T's Azimuth Map Creator, Alt Azimuth Projection Map Creator, if you want a map centered at a particular point. Here, and I shall just tweak the zoom a bit so you can see it again. Here we have the line of sight and the distance from that location to the centre of Melbourne. Melbourne is not labelled because Google Maps removes the label, or when you put the end of the measured distance too close to the word, gets it out of the way. 60 kilometres, and you can see there is a dark green stripe from 3/4 of the way across the top, so right of centre, near Healesville. Comes down and then kind of wiggles through Melbourne and comes out into this huge lake, inland sea, bay, whatever it is, west of that line of sight. That is the River Yarra, as in Yarra Range National Park, which you can partly see on the right. And Warburton, which is where the famous bread is made. Or probably not, actually. Yeah, over here you have Meredith, which I thought was a woman's name. And Anglesey, which I thought was and Torquay, there we go. You have an island off the north coast of Wales and a town on the south coast of Devon, side by side on the coast of Australia there. But anyway, you have the line of sight from Portsea Pier to Melbourne. And here we have a zoom in on the same line of sight. On the Portsea Pier end, you can see that L shape at the bottom is Portsea Pier. I've gone from the northern corner of the outermost end of it, which is as close to Melbourne as you can get on that pier. I've also drawn a vertical line up the image, and for disclosure's sake, it is up because this white blob has a 2x2 centre, not a 1x1 centre. That is a 2 pixel wide vertical. And measured the angle from that centre point between those bottom 2 red dots up the middle of this white line to 400 metres away. That angle is written on there, 21.39 degrees. Again, you are free to do this yourself. If you do this in GIMP, it won't tell you 21.39 degrees. It will tell you 68.61 degrees because it measures from horizontal in the image, not from vertical in the image. So it would tell you how far north of east your line of sight is. I actually recommend not using 21.39 degrees. I would recommend using 21 degrees or even 20 degrees in this case. But 21.39 is the direction to the centre of Melbourne from Portsea Pier. You can see at the top here, top right, column H, camera azimuth, 21.39. Underneath it, that is in radians. We also have in column I, camera elevation 0. Right, 0 means perpendicular to a radius from the centre of the Earth, not perpendicular to the local direction of gravity. That matters. If you want to make it perpendicular to the local direction of gravity, you would want to set camera elevation to plus 0.2005344 degrees. Approximately. Yeah. I got this figure by putting in an extra location just 100 metres out along that line of sight and 5 metres above sea level. You can see here in column G, observer elevation 5. That is metres above sea level. So that's not exactly perpendicular to gravity, but it's damn close. 0.2 degrees up from perpendicular to the radius is damn close to perpendicular to gravity in that direction. If you were looking the opposite direction, it would be 0.2 degrees down. Observer latitude and longitude. Those are the latitude and longitude copied from the end of the pier. Underneath this, in columns F, G and H, I have 3 more locations which are 30 some degrees north and about 117 degrees west, which I think is San Francisco or Malibu or Mont San Jacinto, something like that. Those are irrelevant. I'll remove them later. They don't need to be there. That was why I was mucking around with something else, because this is a very versatile spreadsheet. If none of that made sense because I hadn't fiddled with the zoom and the image hadn't updated, I apologise, but I'm not saying it all again. Over on the right, target 2, latitude and longitude. Don't worry about this. I have 2 targets in so that you can put 2 targets in and get output for 2 targets and tweak things. Tweak your camera elevation, observer elevation. Camera elevation is an angle, observer elevation is an altitude in meters. Or tweak refraction numerator, which is that 115 in the top left, and try to get 2 things at the exact same height in the photograph, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Right? Figure out how far up a building should be exactly level with a peak behind it. I didn't use target 2 for this, didn't feel the need. I used target 1, which is over here on the left. It's the exact same calculations. You enter your target latitude, longitude and elevation in the green boxes. Elevation in this case is 0 because I have gone along sea level for everything. I've just gone along the coastline. I'm not interested in mountaintops in this particular example. I just want to know where the coastline is. If you want mountains, I suggest going to Bing's Maps, selecting Ordnance Survey from the drop down in the top right, zooming in to where you get either the red dashed lines for rights of way on the 1 in 50,000 or the green dashed lines of rights of way on the 1 in 25,000, and then reading off, the contour lines on that, which are pretty accurate, which is more than can be said for the contour lines on Google's terrain view. Anyway, underneath that, a whole load of calculations done on screen to tell you, well, actually, you don't need anything they're telling you. That is how the numbers at the bottom are worked out. If you care about any of that stuff, there it is. One that might be useful is Vector C Azimuth. If you want to make this easy for yourself by having all of your coordinates be positive numbers, which I do recommend, you can look at Vector C Azimuth for the leftmost thing you have, the leftmost point you're plotting, and then make your camera azimuth very slightly less than that. This way all of your x-coordinates will be positive numbers, and you won't get confused about which side of centre you're supposed to be plotting them and accidentally plot things going off to the left in the negatives when you should be continuing off to the right into the positives, or any other such embarrassing mistake. Likewise, elevation relative to camera, the actual elevation, in this case they're the same number, vector C elevation here in box 29C, 29 Charlie, 29 Charlie if you want to be military about it, would be a good number to get as the minimum value. Find the highest one of those you get and use it as a minimum value for your camera. Or of course, just in this case, just set your camera elevation angle to be plus 0.3. Tilt your camera very slightly up, which will very slightly change the image because it's tilting the sensor. It won't make all that much difference. It'll be fine. At the bottom, what you get as output is cyan, x-coordinate, and then magenta. You can choose geometric, ignoring refraction, for, flat earthers who want to pretend that something shouldn't be visible and just ignore refraction, which says it would be visible. Or refracted if you want to do reality, or, well, reality assuming you put in the right refraction numerator and denominator at the top, or flat if you want a very silly drawing that has things in completely the wrong place. Pick your y coordinates, or you could do all three, just in different colours so you don't get confused. Right. That is just one of the points I used there. And here's your output. Oh boy. Somewhere there is a good level of zoom. That's a good level of zoom. I'll come back to that line. There's a set of 7 plus symbols. Top centre of the image there, and you've got another one off to the left, another one off to the right, and there are actually more to both sides. That central one is a point 100 metres from the observer along the line of sight to central Melbourne and at the same elevation above sea level as the observer. This ain't quite the same thing as locally horizontal, but it is extremely close. And as I have only used the first 4 decimal places to get the coordinate, it's close enough not to make any difference. Left, right, up and down from it, we have 10 arc minutes. And we also have up and down 20, and to left and right, 2 degrees, 4 degrees, and 6 degrees. So if you're planning how big a field of view to have in your camera when you're trying to get this view in real life, 4 degrees width should be plenty. Right. There are also some other things. There are numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4 over on the left, 5 back towards 3, 6 and 7 in the same place between 4 and 5, and 8 tucked behind 3. These are the 8 tallest buildings in Melbourne. Bases at sea level, because I didn't bother looking at, street altitude. And not necessarily exactly the correct heights, but close enough, considering how far away they are. Maybe one of them's out by a pixel. That's roughly where they are. I didn't bother getting the exact footprint of them. If you look them up, you'll see why. One of them is a really silly shape, and trying to plot that would have been a lot of work for very little gain. widths aren't necessarily correct, but the height and the heights might be off by a whole pixel. I mean, your refraction might be off as well. But it's a pretty good indication. The line going across them, cutting their tops off, starting at the top left here and ending at the top right here, that is actually a collection of several lines, which is why it's so thick. Those are drawn at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 kilometres from the observer across the sea surface. Lower down we have more lines, and you'll notice those lines are a bit of a mess. Starting way over here on the left, well outside that, even the 12-degree field of view. Zoom in a little more. There is a Royal Australian Air Force base somewhere on the west side of, well, west of Melbourne. From there you can follow the coast to the east, and then there's a bay, and then a little river running into it. You can follow that stream up, which gives you this bit of line that's sticking out to the left. And then there's more of the coast and another river, and more coastline, and across here somewhere, as your coastline gets into nearly into Melbourne, there is an inlet, and there is a harbour, and then it gets farther up, and then there is a tributary off to the left, this bottom line extending to the left side, running into that there river, Yarra. Yarra, Yarra, you monster. And that river has more harbour areas on the far side of it. You can see this little extra pixel thickness on the underside. That's quite a long harbour on the north side of that river, farthest from the observer. And following the river up, it's got more details and more shape, and it runs. The river is the bottom line here. You have a thick top line and a thin bottom line. The thin bottom line is the river through Melbourne, near side of the city centre, which is why it is above the bases of those buildings. And way out here to the east, there is a little island in it, and then there's sort of a almost an oxbow. Yeah, two sharp bends and one wide bend, and then there's a bridge. And I've stopped bothering with the river out to the bridge. That right-hand end of the bottom line is that bridge upstream of the island. Come back down the river, all the way back down, out past the harbours and back out to sea, and follow the coast, and you get the upper line. And the coastline is it's got all kinds of interesting features on it, which is why this line sometimes doubles back on itself and gets 2 pixels thick, and so on. That is closer than the river, obviously, even farther from Melbourne, even farther at the near side of the bases of those buildings, which is why it is higher above the bases of those buildings in this image, because we're looking at it from underneath, through the earth. And that coastline continues to the east, beyond as far up as I bothered tracking the river, and way out here, beyond where it was worth bothering to track it at all. And I got one just before the edge of the image. There were actually several more off to the right, but what's the point in them? What's the point in showing them? I mean, we're talking about Melbourne. So there's your view of Melbourne. Yep, I can just fit a 4 degree by 3 degree, well, 4 degree by whatever it works out at, field of view onto the screen. Remember I started with a different line. Down here, there is this line. This line is a view from underneath of the north, well, part of, I stopped there, part of the north coast of Australia. So that's where it would be if you were standing on Portsea Pier looking at Melbourne. When M.C.Toon pointed out to this guy that the photo this guy had sent, which he claimed was from the end of Portsea Pier, actually was a near perfect match for photographs taken from a different place, sort of up here west of Chadstone, a heck of a lot closer to Melbourne. this guy on the right, this serial fraudster, liar, creepy weirdo who's been accused of sexually assaulting children and has married, I think, 4 different women and not bothered telling any of them that he was already married, and so on and so forth, and pretended to be building replica supercars to get people to make down payments and then absconded with the money and never provided anything, and etc., etc. Claimed that M.C.Toon had not, in fact, debunked him because M.C.Toon, although he sent his friend to the place from which the photograph was actually taken to give everyone watching the live stream a view of the photograph that, the view that was in the photograph that was taken, and confirm that that was the place from which that view is available, he hadn't sent someone else to Portsea Pier to show the view from Portsea Pier. So, there you go. There's the view of Melbourne from Portsea Pier. And no, you can't see the buildings all the way down to the bottom, because the bottoms of the buildings down here between -10 and, well, around 15 minutes of arc below that approximate level are well below this water surface that is only about 4 minutes of arc below that approximate level. So, well done for putting a brave face on it, but Danny boy, you got busted.